Hi, today's episode I wanted to talk to you about what happens if a member of your team refuses to return from furlough after you've furloughed them for 3 weeks. Now, this has already started. So for some organisations, they have obviously either started to see an upturn in business and so have been able to make the decision to unfurlough their staff. For others, they've want to swap the teams around. Perhaps one team has stayed back to work and they've furloughed another team, and now they'd like to swap those round now that 3 weeks has passed. Or for other organisations, the rules in relation to how they operate, so long as they can now social distance, have been put in place to enable them to reopen in some capacity. Perhaps they've changed their business model, or they've identified that they can work safely for both the public and for the employees. So making the call or communicating with the staff to tell them that good news, they can return from furlough, for some employers hasn't gone as well as they might have hoped and imagined. Now, this isn't true of all employees. Obviously, many employees will gratefully learn from their employer that they are no longer on furlough and they can return to work. Remember, many people on furlough are receiving 80% of their normal salary, their salary as it was as February, and for them, they want to return to work. Perhaps the wages went up in April, or perhaps being able to earn their money is very attractive to them. So for many employees, the news that they can return is welcomed, and very much they look forward to getting back with their team and working with the customers. But surprisingly, or perhaps not surprisingly, depending on how you think about it, for other employees, the news isn't welcome. Now, I think what we've got to remember here as leaders is that for some people, furlough has presented safety, as meant safety. Furlough has meant that the family is under one roof in a lockdown situation. They've been told that the outside world is a scary place at the moment and we should stay home, protect the NHS and save lives. So for many families and obviously employees who live in those homes, the idea of being furloughed presents an idea of safety, being told that it's okay for you to not go to work, for you to not travel, for you to not commute, you are safe at home. So being told that it's now that you want them to return to work can result in people giving what we call an emotional response. And this emotional response can be, as raw as, gosh, I'm not ready to come back to work, or, I'd rather not come back to work. One employee said to their employer this week, I'd rather not, I've been rather busy, So for every employee, there'll be a different emotional response. And many of it's driven by, actually, I'd rather not, I'd rather stay at home, because stay at home equals safety for me right now. And as leaders, we've got to understand and empathise with that and recognise where our employees are coming from. Having said that, it was your decision as an employer to furlough your staff, and it will be your decision as an employer to lift furlough and to unfurlough your staff. So whilst you must understand that you might get an emotional response, you don't necessarily have to then react to that response with, that's fine, stay where you are. You can, as an employer, operate your business, and if you need people to return to work, they can't be unreasonable in their rejection of that suggestion or that requirement, shall we say. So when you contact your employee to ask them to return to work, if they say to you things like, I can't return to work, I've got a new puppy, which is one we've heard this week, that's very nice. They've got a new puppy, and I can understand their desire to continue to do the puppy bonding that you do in the first few weeks of having a new puppy, but they really should have thought this through, because their obligation to you and their contract of employment is for them to attend work. When you lift furlough, you're telling them to re-attend work, and so whilst they can request a period of leave, a continuing leave, they can't necessarily expect it. And so if an employee refuses to come to work and tells you they can't come back, this is what you need to do. First of all, I want you to understand where they're coming from. Is this coming from a position of can't or won't? So won't might include, the behaviour of, I'd rather not be there, I've got other things to do, I don't want to come back to work. And can't might become from a place of, actually, I'm self-isolating because we have symptoms in our household, or I've been unwell myself. Perhaps that might be related to COVID-19 or not. For some employees, they will be shielding, so they can't return to work because they've actually had a letter from the NHS telling them that they should shield for a period of time and that they shouldn't be going to work. Now, we do know that those people who are shielding and obviously in receipt of those letters can be furloughed. And they may well be the employees for whom you furloughed first and you know that you had a shielding letter and that's why you did, or you selected them when you had to choose because on the basis that they had a shielding letter. So that may happen. But you also may get, and I know again other people have had this week, I can't return to work because I've discovered I'm pregnant. So again, we do know that with pregnancy, that's not an automatic right to shielding, and you do need to obviously think about a risk assessment to see if it is safe for that employee to return to work and to follow your normal pregnancy related health and safety steps before we decide to return them to work from furlough. Now, as I say, if they were to refuse to come to work because of a won't rather than a can't, then you as an employer are well within your rights to ask the employee to explain to you so that you understand what it is that concerns them about returning to work. And again, we should listen to understand. So as leaders, we should be keen to understand where the employee is coming from to see if a bit of reassurance from you can obviously ask them to or reverse their decision to say they don't want to come back. So an employee, when they understand that if they don't return they won't be paid, will often change their mind. An employee who is told, well, if you don't return from furlough, we will obviously need to consider this a breach of contract, because obviously you had to be available for work when you signed your furlough agreement, will often consider their position and consider whether they wish to change their mind. For some employees, the idea of returning from furlough may well be so unattractive that they might go off sick, and they might tell you that actually they're not fit for work now, and they'll be self-certificating before getting a doctor's note to say that they can stay off work through sickness absence. Again, treat as you would any sickness absence, manage that in exactly the same way as you would any sickness absence. What we do know is that once you've been furloughed, you can't receive SSP. So obviously it'll be one or the other. You'd lift the furlough, they'd be on SSP, or if you had a company sick pay scheme, that would kick in. And that may well be something that some people say to you, that they won't because they've become quite stressed at the idea of coming back to work. We know that stress and anxiety is particularly high in the 18 to 24-year-old age group. 50% reported in a survey at the end of last week that they were feeling more anxious than they've ever felt before. So when you get the response of won't, and once we've understood where that response is coming from, and once you've tried to persuade them to change their mind, if that doesn't work, then obviously you've got to follow your normal procedures. So if somebody has got service, I'd be expecting you to obviously communicate with that employee in writing and explain to them obviously that you want to sit down and discuss with them their refusal to return to work. If they don't have 2 years service, I would advise you to seek HR advice, because it may well be you have more range of options than if somebody has got longer service. Remember, refusal to attend work on health and safety grounds can obviously not require somebody to need service in order to bring a claim at a tribunal, and therefore I think you'd always be better treating it as an authorised unpaid absence than you would a disciplinary matter. So that's being said, do take advice on any specific situation when somebody refuses to come to work. And to the owner of the beautiful puppy whose eyes you've been staring into for the last 10 minutes, I can tell you that Wilsey is very much not a furlough puppy. Whilst he will arrive during this lady's business closure, he's very much wanted and very much longed for, and he's going to have an amazing summer with the family that he's joining. So here's to Wilsey and here's to your businesses, and if we can be of any assistance, please come and check us out at redwing-solutions.co.uk. We are a HR firm specialising in early years, but we work with all SMEs across the UK. Lovely to speak to you. Bye bye.